Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're going to do something that I've not done before. Today we're going to have a quick quarterly review of kind of what's gone on in the first quarter of 2020 with World of Warships. And we're going to culminate looking at all of the various server population numbers. You may have seen Zoop do this before based on some data that I had put together in an Excel spreadsheet that I had shared with him previously. He's busy. And so I thought, I should do this. I've decided I'm going to start kind of just having a look at these numbers once a quarter. And as I started to build this video, I thought, well, why don't we go beyond that? Why don't we just talk about what all's gone on? That way we can consider all the things that have happened this quarter when we start, then as we go and we look at the various server populations. So let's get to it. So first quarter 2020 for shooty boats here. Of course, obviously starting off with a year, kind of the tail end, the last first 2 weeks of the year with the tail end of 8.11. Now, that brought with it the end of the Puerto Rico event and all of the giant train wreck and bad vibes that came with that. So there's a very valid argument to be made that we started off this year kind of on the wrong foot. But then again, we kind of also ended last year on the wrong foot. And the way patch cycles work was kind of inevitable. But as we moved on into the rest of the year, and we got into 9.0, we started off with new ships. There's a ton. It seems like they're just cramming new ships into the game as quick as they can these days. And so 9.0 brought us our first early access to the British heavy cruiser line, the British cruiser split. So this was your first chance to earn, Hawkins, Devonshire, Surrey, and all that stuff, and kind of slowly work your way through that line. We had a clan battle season. I put season 7 in here. I might be wrong. Don't crucify me if I got the wrong season. I think it was season 7. It might have been season 6. I didn't go look, okay? But either way, there was a clan battle season in here. One might argue this was the last of the clan battle seasons that had a lot of population. I've seen some data out there that indicates that clan battles participation has been on the decline now for 2 or 3 seasons. I don't think it's going to be any better this season. I know that lots of clans struggled with this season, not the one we're in now, but the one earlier this year, and this one we're in now, whether it's 7 or 8, I can't remember, but it feels like it just came too quick. It feels like they're just cramming these clan battle seasons into the game as quick as they can. So yeah, but this last season, I know a lot of folks kind of left a bad taste in their mouth, but it is what it is. 9.0 did start something really, really good, and that is they've started making small tweaks to ships basically every patch based on the feedback data that they're getting. Ordinarily, what was happening up to this point was we were getting, they'd gather all this data, and then they'd swing the nerf bat like a fucking sledgehammer, right? And then we'd go, what? I mean, the Yu Yang nerf that we got I think it was last year, is the quintessential example of the old method. But what we're seeing now is a much more gradual, okay, we've got some data that says this ship is probably a little overtuned. Let's pull it back 2% and see what happens. And then let's pull it back 2% more and see what happens until they finally find that sweet spot. And so 9.0 was the first time they really started in on this with the changes to Hindenburg. And you're going to see some some repeat offenders on this list as we go through the patches. Of course, we hit 9.1 in February, which was the full release of the British cruiser line. Of course, all those ships now available for everybody into the game. We got a new season of ranked battles. Again, I think it was 15. Don't quote me. I didn't look. I just wanted to get this video out. But there was a ranked battle season in here. This was, of course, another Tier 10 season, 7v7 arms race. This one had carriers allowed, and a lot of salt, a lot of opinions either way on that one. The ranked games that I played, I will say I didn't see many carriers. But I also feel like the carriers plus arms race is a horrid idea, and I feel like anybody who dealt with a carrier in that ranked season would probably agree with me. If you played a carrier, you probably don't agree with me, but that's fine. I accept that. 9.1 also brought with it some really nice changes to upgrades, right? We got some nice tweaks. They pulled out that awful targeting acquisition thing. It was an upgrade slot 5. They replaced it with some other options. There's the new torpedo module one that's back in slot 2. Some much overdue, long needed changes to the various upgrades that were available. This was a real big one for a lot of people, of course. They removed some of these ships from the armory. Now, in the case of Nusra Shimmy Black and Flint, they've already announced that those will be back for coal in the future, at least sometime in the summer at the earliest, right? They won't tell you when, but they're basically like 6 months minimum. So August is the earliest that we could see those ships come back to the armory. But Smolensk and Jean Bart were simply removed for good, as near as we know. No plans announced to bring those ships back anytime soon. Of course, we got a new map, Northern Waters. It's good to see them continuing to develop this. I think that the new maps have slowed down a bit as we have pushed towards submarines. There's been two big things I think that have kind of slowed down the map generation. If you remember back about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it felt like every other patch we were getting a brand new map. They were just coming out like hotcakes. And then we've hit this pause, and we've gotten maybe like one new map a year. I feel like there's two reasons for that. One is I think that they've probably reached a pretty good point where there's quite a number of maps available, and I think they also they were making two major modifications to the maps that we had. One is they were going back in and literally redoing the physics, the sizing, and every map had to be redone for 3D, right? Now every map had to have subsurface so that the submarines could be incorporated. And the other thing is, in the same time they were doing that, they redid all the lighting, right? All the lighting on so many of these maps is new now. You can see individual shadows on the surface of the water as the clouds roll overhead and stuff. They're gorgeous, but all of that takes time and effort, and I think all of those things have impacted how quickly we're getting new maps. As I'm hopeful that as we get deeper into this year, we'll start seeing more and more maps come to the game, maybe 2 or 3 a year, but that's speculative. That's just my hope. And of course, another round of balance tweaks. This was their first crack at starting to pull in, kind of pull the leash a little bit on Hakuryu's rockets, and we've seen that now happen a couple of times. We've also seen them starting to walk back some of the Nerf bat that they slapped Yu Yang with a little bit, and maybe tweak some of the other Pan-Asian destroyers a small bit as well. And of course, Kremlin's on the list again, Sinop's on the list. You're going to see them again in a minute. 9.2 rolled around, of course, in March, and we got our early access to the European destroyer line. Now, I'll say something, I want to point something out here. Realize that we went from 9.0 having early access to British heavy cruisers. 9.1, British heavy cruisers release. 9.2, bam, early access to a new line. 9.3, bam, new line releases. As we go down the year, 9.4, early access to the Russian cruiser split. 9.5, Russian cruiser split releases. We're in this weird cycle that we've never hit in this game in almost 5 years now, where we're getting brand new tech tree ships every other patch. Essentially every patch, if you want to be honest, but at least every other patch. That is really weird. Ordinarily, when they'd come out with 3 to 5 new ship lines a year, there'd almost always be a gap. But it's not really happening the way they're doing things now. One thing I will say that I really liked about the early access to the European destroyer line is that they did a great job with how you obtained those ships early. The way that the tokens worked and the directives worked and all that stuff. I felt like that was the first time that it was kind of, I can invest time in this if I want to, but I'm not just going to just play the game like I normally do, and these ships are just going to fall into my lap, right? And that was really nice. I liked that they made it, took a little effort to get these things. Of course, Smolin releasing alongside with that. She came out for about 2 million free XP about the same time. Up at tier 10. The permanent camo event that went along with the pre-release of the line, the Tre Krona, the 3 Crowns permanent camo event, was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed these. The camos themselves are gorgeous. And the little, go earn the ship and then go play the ship and earn this little premium permanent camo reward thing was a really neat way to kind of release the line early. I kind of wish they had done something similar for the British heavy cruisers. These next two are kind of tied together, right? Because the IFE changes and the changes to cruiser and battleship armor are all tied together in this big smorgasbord of things that they pushed across the board about 6 weeks ago to try and further differentiate light cruisers from heavy cruisers. You've heard me say this before if you've watched the channel. I love this change. I realize that there are certain light cruisers that get screwed. Right, but I'm okay with this. I love playing cruisers, but I'm okay with this. Under no circumstances, in my opinion, should a tier 7 light cruiser be able to bully a tier 9 battleship. Right, but we had that previously because of how IFHE worked. Yes, it's more confusing now. Unquestionably, it's more confusing now. You need charts and an easel to understand how the armor interactions work at every tier. But the short, condensed version is that a lower-tiered light cruiser with IFHE will be able to combat equal-tiered battleships, possibly when slightly up tier, like battleships like 1 tier higher, but in many cases is going to struggle harder against battleships 2 tiers higher. And honestly, I'm okay with that, because it means that down-tiered heavy cruiser potentially has less of that problem. and now you have an incentive to reach for a heavy cruiser instead of a light cruiser. So not only because they have more armor, but because you potentially can get more work out of those shells, and I really like that. So a couple of changes there, of course, and then of course more balance tweaks. Right, we got Sun Up and Kremlin on the list again, on the naughty list again. The Atlanta and Flint changes were buffs. It was a little surprising, but there they are. Jutland and Daring got minor nerfs. I'm not really surprised. Daring is in this weird place now where like gearing just feels terrible. Am I the only one that feels that way? I feel like gearing has been utterly left behind by like every other tier 10 destroyer, and it feels terrible. Of course, our Kuryu's rockets getting slapped again. Gearing actually getting a little bit of love and more tweaks to the Pan-Asians, and then some AA buffs to Amalfi. So now that we've kind of looked through what all's gone on in the quarter, where are we at population-wise? Oh, I missed one. Oh, that's right. The minimum time between bomber attacks. That's right. They made this change to carriers. This was actually another really good change, right? Carriers are now there's like a longer minimum time in between bomber attacks. All right, so let's have a look at server populations here. All right, so to make everybody understand what you're seeing here, all right, let me explain to you how I do this. If you've seen this graph somewhere else, I have posted it on the forums. Several other CCs have used similar data to produce videos. Let me explain to you what I do. There's a website available on the obviously available on the web. This is a public website. There's no big secret. Okay, I'll put the link down below. You can go gather this data yourself for all I care. All right, but what it does is it monitors the population of every war server in World of Warships every day. Every hour of every day, essentially, and pulls a number. And then it just aggregates that data. So you can pull data, population data, on any given day, any given month, all the way back to open beta in July of 2015. Now, what I did was I basically went through and I grouped by quarter, which is very easy to do on this website. You can just take a snapshot and say, I want to see second quarter 2016, and the server will the graph will then show you what the average daily server population was in that quarter, and that's exactly all I've done here, right? So quarter by quarter, you're seeing the average number of people logged in every day throughout the life of the game. So on the far left of the graph, third quarter 15, that's when the game went into open beta. That's July 2015, all the way through on the far right, the end of the quarter we just finished, first quarter of 2020. Now, one of the things you'll see along the way, you'll see some fourth quarter spikes or first quarter spikes. Those are almost always for the big Christmas events, right? Almost every server has these spikes because they tend to bring back people who have more time over the holidays, they want to play for their freebies at Christmas, and so on and so forth, right? NA here, what you're looking at right now, this is the NA only graph. You're only seeing the NA's average population population data. So what we're seeing here, of course, the trend line has been positive pretty much throughout the life of the NA server. You can see the lows there back kind of in the early days. But since then, we've been on like a steady climb, buoyed by the nice Christmas events in 2016 and then 2017. The one in 2017 started late, if you'll remember. That's why the first quarter 2018 number is so high. And then starting in 2018, server populations on NA just kind of stayed nice and steady. Early 2019, you see a dip there, right? Because first quarter 2019 was the end of the previous Christmas event and then the release of the carrier rework. And so as you head into the middle of last year, second quarter and third quarter 2019, you can see the population drop. And I'm honestly convinced that's because of the turmoil the game was going through, right? There was so much going on back then that those numbers are down. But then starting in fourth quarter and then now into first quarter 2020, you see a huge population spike on into literally we're getting now more people playing on NA on an average basis than have ever played on NA in the history of the game. That's kind of noteworthy when you think about it. Now, the possibility exists that some of this is pandemic related. I won't dispute that. Everybody's going to say that, and you know what? You're right. However, I don't believe it's 100% pandemic related. I feel like that they're doing a good job bringing in new players. You constantly see new players in the game. Where I think wargaming is falling down, and I'm going to speak about NA here. I'll gloss over the other servers in a minute, and then we'll show you the whole graphs at the end. But I want to talk about NA for a minute. I feel like what wargaming is not doing a great job of is retaining veteran players. I feel like everybody, we all know, we all see it, right? Almost every CC I've spoken to has commented on it. Every single one of us who watches this video knows somebody that played this game for 3+ years with us that in the last 18 months has just said, you know what? I am done, kids. I'm done. And they've walked away. Um, and I think we're continuing to see more and more of that. So I think that's one of the many reasons that so many of us, and myself included, have kvetched and griped about like the quality of teams because we're getting so many of these new players that they get all the camos and the flags and the bonuses, and they don't have to spend nearly as long going from, say tier 3 or 4 up to like tier 7, 8, 9, and then suddenly they're in these high tier games and they don't know their stern from their bow, right? And you're like, why are you dead in 3 minutes? And it happens all the time. And I think it's because there's such a high population of new players. There's such a high turnover rate right now. Now that's my speculation, right? That's a belief I have. The data that you're looking at right now only says that there's lots of people playing the game and that the population of the game on the NA server is healthy. And I think that's good. Like you need people playing the game because people playing the game, people logged in almost invariably equates to sooner or later people will spend money, all right? So that's, if the game's going to continue, somebody's got to invest in it, right? So that's good. But I do feel like that in their quest to bring in more players, I feel like that there's definitely an alienation factor going on with the long-term player base. And we're going to see, we're going to look as we go down the next few slides, and we're going to look and see if maybe this is a trend, or maybe it's just an anything. I don't know. So here's EU. Let's have a quick look at EU. Their high water mark is still right after release, not really surprising. And their trend line is nice and steady, right? You see the high points again for the Christmas events, fourth quarter 16, first quarter 18, and again a small high point towards the end of 2018, early 2019. But they also went through the same thing we did last summer, that second quarter, third quarter dip. Now, remember, also, I didn't mention this talking about the NA slide, but it's historical, and you can look at this data and see it. Second quarter, third quarter, on all of these servers is always low. Always low. The weather's nice. People are out. People are traveling. People are on vacation, whatever. But I also feel like, at least in 2019, some of that was people staying away from the game while the carrier thing unfolded, because it got a ton of bad vibes, ton of bad press from the existing player base, and it was so wonky there for a while. You just had no idea what was going on. So I feel like some of those numbers are possibly artificially lower than they otherwise might have been. It's really easy to see here on the EU curve. Look at starting in second quarter 2018. Look at this, right? And then follow this line, nice steady increase. And if you imagine this line continuing, you can kind of imagine it. Yeah, it would be a nice steady rise. But we have this gap in the middle, partly because summer, and partly because carrier rework. And I think the confusion and the uncertainty around all of that definitely depressed those numbers. But EU, a very healthy server. They've also recently, if you'll notice, barely. Just had their best quarter since launch in terms of active daily population. That's really that's noteworthy in my opinion. Now RU is where things don't look so rosy, and Zoop pointed this out in an analysis that he did around 2-3 months ago. All right, when I ran these numbers for fourth quarter, he took a copy and did a video, and this is one of those places where he made some leaps to conclusions, or made some conclusions, or drew some I didn't agree with, right? And I'll talk about that as we look at this slide. So you can see that RU started off very healthy, 20,000 people a day for a while, had their regular summer dip, but it's obvious that their trend line is in going south, right? They've got these peaks. Again, they have the same peaks that every server has in the fall and the winter, and for the Christmas events. You see it again here, and then kind of coming back up again. To me, the interesting number will be to see if RU continues this into second quarter this year, right? If second quarter 2020 isn't as bad as second quarter 2019, okay, maybe RU starting to recover a bit. We'll see. But in general, the RU population has been on a decline for a while. Zoop made a comment during one of his videos. He talked about how he felt like that was one of the reasons we were seeing so many Russian ships, the Russian battleships and the Russian cruiser split and all the rest of this stuff. And I disagree. And the reason for that is, look at the numbers, right? Just look at these numbers. When did the Russian battleships come out? Early last year, right? Sometime, I forget, I looked it up once. It was like February of last year or something like that, almost exactly a year ago. But there's no population bump here. It didn't get them anything. And so Zoop made a comment that he felt like the Russian cruiser stuff that was coming down the line was because they're trying to salvage their Russian player base, and I don't think that's it at all. Because if that was the case, to me it should have been based on actual experience. Hey, we did this before. We released Russian battleships, and there was a population spike, but it really wasn't, right? So why would you do that in the hopes that it would magically generate interest when an entire line didn't before? Why do you think a couple or 3 or 5 ships is going to make a difference now? I don't think that's it at all. I think there's a lot of reasons for this. I think part of it is cultural, because I feel like tanks is always going to be the bigger title in Russia. A lot of people in the West, and I see this commonly on the NA servers and the EU servers, they're constantly mocking the Russian Navy, the Soviet Navy, oh, ha, ha, paper Navy, all this stuff. And I guess maybe there's some truth to that in the sense of they weren't as big a naval power in the Second World War and during the Cold War as most of the Western allies were. But also, I think that culturally, there's not the same passion, let's say, for historical naval combat, because Russian history simply doesn't have as much of it. I mean, look at British history. They were a sea power, a seafaring nation for centuries, literally centuries. But Russia didn't even attempt this until Peter the Great. And even then, even after Peter the Great, kind of dragged them kicking and screaming into this idea of naval power, they still really struggled with it because where they are geographically, there's not a tremendous need for it, right? They have a limited number of ports. You're talking about Murmansk and Sevastopol and St. Petersburg, and other points on the Black Sea, Vladivostok in the east. There's not a lot of major fleet bases, a lot of need to be able to project naval power when you're a country the size of Russia. And so I think there's simply overall a less of a passionate fan base as you might find in most of the rest of the world. And I think that's some of the reason you're seeing this kind of steady decline. That's just me. And then, of course, Asia. Now, this is the one that I can't wrap my brain around, right? Asia started off strong. You see it all the way back at release, and then kind of settled into this doldrums for literally 2 or 3 years. And then suddenly, in the last few quarters, has just gone bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Now, some of this, I hope I want to be able to give credit to the Asian marketing team for hey guys, good job. But there's a caveat to that, because every time I talk to one of the Asian CCs, or every time I want to see one of the Asian CCs kind of interacting in chat, they're constantly complaining about the huge bot population on Asia. So I have to wonder if this number isn't somewhat inflated by that. I have no way of knowing. Only Wargaming can tell you that. But I kind of caveat this a little bit with this might be a little optimistic and a little inflated. I don't know. We'll have to see. But kudos to whatever it is that's driving this. Obviously, the carrier rework was better received in Asia than any other server, and this was something that the devs pointed out to us in St. Petersburg last year as one of the reasons that while every other server was clamoring for, man, you got to do something about these carriers in queue, the Asia server was basically driving the fact that, guys, we can't. Carriers are hugely popular in Asia, and if we screw over how the queues work, then we screw over and literally an entire server. And they were struggling with that, and probably, I'm assuming, still continuing to do so. Because you see here, every other server took a population dip in second and third quarter 19, but not Asia. Asia went the other way and has continued to go the other way. And again, some of this may be COVID related. I'll allow that, but I don't believe all of it is. I don't know. I'm genuinely curious. So this last slide is just an amalgamation of everything. So you saw every server individually. Now you're seeing them all on the same graph at the same time, right? So you see here Asia starting off, and for years Asia was kind of the bottom of the pack, but even now its trend line is positive. It's jumped up bigger than NA even in terms of population. NA, a nice steady positive trend line. Even EU's kind of leveled out. Theirs was trending down as recently as 2 quarters ago, but look at them now, nice and steady. And then, of course, Russia, as we were talking about, kind of on the downward trend there. But anyway, guys, I mean, there's a lot of people on the forums, Reddit, whoever, they're constantly talking about the demise of this game, and I can't wait for this game to fail. It's not happening, fellas. There's too many people still playing. And year over year, I've got those numbers too if you want to see them. Things look really good. People are logging in, people are playing, and presumably people are spending money. I I think, and I mentioned this talking about the NA slide, I feel like probably the one thing that Wargaming is probably struggling with is retention of the veteran player base. I see more and more veteran players, longtime players, 3, 4, 5 years under their belts, just saying, you know what, guys, enough, and walking away. And that's sad. Like those are very commonly some of your most ardent and strident supporters. At the same time, it does happen to every title that's been around a while, right? Every online title goes through this stuff. I walked away myself from Warcraft, right, many years ago. What, after like 7 years of playing regularly, literally every day I would log in, and finally I was like, you know what, enough, and it happens, right? But anyway, guys, there you go. Just some thoughts and some data to talk about. I'll put some links down below. You're free to build this sort of thing yourself. This is not secret information. I haven't pulled this from some mega secret database. This is all publicly available on the web, and you're free to draw your own conclusions from it. Okay? Y'all be safe out there. Wash your hands. I'll catch you next time.